mountains rose like giants against the sky, their peaks dusted with snow even in spring. Clara stumbled along the dirt road, wrists sore from the rope her uncle had tied around them. Her family had branded her useless, unable to bear children, and sold her to a passing trader for a mule and a sack of flour. Each step felt heavier than the last, betrayal weighing down her soul. She was discarded, abandoned by those meant to protect her, and carried toward a mountain town where men's eyes were sharper than knives. The trader's wagon creaked as it rolled into the settlement, dust swirling in the wind. Rough men leaned against hitching posts, spitting tobacco and watching her with calculating glances. Clara lowered her gaze, shame heating her face. She could hear their crude whispers, words that made her stomach knot, yet one figure stood apart. He leaned on his rifle, broad-shouldered and bearded, his eyes the color of storm clouds. He watched silently, not with hunger or mockery, but with something unreadable. Curiosity, perhaps even pity. That man was Samuel Kane, a mountain trapper who lived alone in the high wilderness. He had come to town for supplies, flour, salt, and powder for his rifle. But when he saw Clara standing in chains, her spirit broken, he felt something stir deep inside him. Years of solitude had hardened him, yet in her trembling form he saw a reflection of his own loneliness. While others bid for her as if she were livestock, Samuel stepped forward, laying silver coins on the table. "I'll take her," he said firmly. Clara could hardly breathe as the rope was untied. She looked up, startled by Samuel's calm, steady expression. He did not touch her roughly or mock her. He simply nodded toward his mule and wagon. "Come," he said, his voice low and gentle. The trader shrugged, pocketing the coins. To Clara, it felt unreal. She had been sold twice in 1 week, but this time something felt different. Samuel did not look at her as property. He looked at her as a human being. They traveled into the mountains, silence stretching between them. Samuel led the mule along rocky trails, the air turning crisp as the land climbed higher. Clara wrapped herself in a worn shawl he had handed her, breathing in pine and smoke carried by the wind. Nights were cold, but Samuel built a fire and gave her the only blanket he had, sleeping against the logs instead. She whispered her thanks, but he only shrugged, saying, "A man's got no use for warmth when someone else needs it more." At last, they reached Samuel's homestead, a rough-hewn cabin tucked into the trees with smoke rising from a stone chimney. Chickens scratched at the dirt yard and a small corral held a mule. To Clara, it seemed humble but safe. Samuel unloaded supplies, then handed her a small loaf of bread. "Eat," he said simply. She devoured it, hunger tearing through her manners. Instead of scolding, he only nodded. "A woman shouldn't starve," he added, as if it were the simplest truth in the world. Days passed, and Clara began to learn the rhythm of mountain life. She mended his shirts with needle and thread, tended to the chickens, and swept the cabin floor. Samuel spent long hours trapping, hunting, and cutting wood, yet he always made sure she had food before himself. He never demanded anything of her, never treated her as less than equal. At night they sat by the fire, silent at first, until slowly she told him of her family, the cruelty, the betrayal, the ache of being unwanted. Samuel listened, eyes shadowed, then said quietly, "You ain't useless. Don't let their lies stay with you." One stormy night, thunder rolled through the mountains, rattling the shutters. Samuel returned soaked, dragging a buck he had hunted. Clara rushed to help, pulling his wet coat from his shoulders. For the first time, their hands brushed, lingering a moment longer than necessary. Samuel's gaze softened, the stormlight flickering in his eyes. He looked at her not with pity, but with something deeper, respect and perhaps even longing. Clara felt her heart pound. For the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. Weeks turned into months. Together, they worked to expand the cabin, Samuel cutting logs while Clara mixed mud and straw for chinking. One afternoon, he paused, leaning on his axe. "This place should be more than a cabin," he said. "It should be a home." Clara looked at him, realization dawning. He wasn't just building walls of wood, he was building a future with her in it. That night, as the firelight flickered across their faces, Samuel spoke again. "Clara," he said slowly, "I don't want you to just stay here. I want you to belong here, with me." Her breath caught in her throat. No one had ever wanted her, not as family, not as wife. She searched his face for mockery, but found none, only steady, quiet truth. Tears filled her eyes as she nodded, her voice trembling. "Yes, I'll stay. Samuel reached across the fire, taking her hand in his calloused one. It was not the grip of ownership, but of promise. He whispered a single word that melted her last defenses. Wife. Spring returned, painting the mountain meadows with wildflowers. Clara walked outside one morning, watching smoke curl from the chimney of the cabin Samuel had built strong for them both. She heard the sound of his axe echoing in the trees, steady and reliable. Her heart swelled with a new strength, knowing she was no longer useless, no longer discarded. She was loved not for what she could give, but for who she was. The mountains that once seemed cold and endless now felt like shelter, a sanctuary where broken lives could be mended. And in that wild, unforgiving land, Clara and Samuel built a life together. Not one of riches or grandeur, but one of quiet devotion. Every plank of the cabin, every loaf of bread, every fire they shared became a symbol of their bond. Where others had seen her as worthless, Samuel saw her as irreplaceable. And so the lonely mountain man who once roamed the wilderness alone found more than a wife. He found his heart's home,